This is bonus content for our two-part Instructlab video theories. In this episode, we will use the Instructlab command line tool and follow the steps outlined in this flowchart. We will be working within a Linux virtual machine where Instructlab has already been configured and two models have already been loaded. Therefore, we will skip step 1, which is to download model from Hugging Face, and we will start with step 2. Here we're connected to the virtual machine via SSH. So once we're connected, we can run this command, which is to start a bash shell in the VM with root privileges, which is required to run Instructlab. Then we can change our directory to Instructlab, and we will start a virtual environment. And then you can see that there is a vinf at the beginning of this line. That means you have successfully initialized a virtual environment, and we are running with root privileges. From here, if we run list models, and you will see that we have two models that have been pre-downloaded for you in this lab. And one is a Granite 7B model, and the other is Marinite 7B model. Few side note here, the Q4 in the names means that both of these models are 4-bit quantized version of the original models, which means that we are using a lower precision data type, in this case 4 bits, to represent the model weights, which usually take 32 bits to represent without any quantization. That leads to less memory requirement and enable us to load larger models into GPU memory or use smaller GPUs or even CPUs that might not have been able to handle our larger model otherwise. But this memory efficiency comes with a trade-off between the model performance. What you will notice is that a quantized model will not be able to perform as well as its non-quantized version. The KM after the Q4 just indicates the method used to quantize these models. If you are interested in the quantization techniques, just do a quick search. There are many insightful information out there on site like Hugging Face. And then we can run ilab model serve command to serve the model in the VM. If you see this info, it means that the model is being served, and now we need to open another terminal so that we can test out this model endpoint. Now let's bring up a second terminal. You can either do a new window or a new tab. So in my second tab of the terminal, I will running the same commands to connect to the VM, change the working directory, and then initialize a virtual environment. Let's run the SSH line and sudo bash, change the working directory, and then initialize the virtual environment. And this time we will enter the chat mode so that we can interact with the model we are serving in the other terminal. Now we will be able to chat with the Granite model that we started the serving endpoint earlier. And let's start with a question. For example, what is the Google Generative AI offering? And then you can see that the model is producing output, and it might take some time for it to finish its answer. Okay, then we can continue the conversation by asking, is it on IBM Cloud? As you can see that the model will be aware of the context by the time we're asking this question and know that by it, we're referring to Google's generative AI models. If somehow you do not want to continue the conversation, you'd rather start a new session, what you can do is press / and an N. In that case, we will be able to start a new chatter with the model. At any point of time, if you want to get some help and see what commands are available, you can type / and H to get a list of commands that's available in the chat mode. If you want to chat with the other model, then you will need to first quit the current session with this model by pressing / Q and hit return. And then we're back to the virtual environment. And then if we go back to the first terminal, very likely you will see that the connection has been closed again. So what we need to do is to run this SSH command again. Then we do the same thing, sudo bash, back to the Instructlab folder, initialize the virtual environment. And then from here, we will start serving the other model. We will provide the model pass. This time, we will initialize the Marinite model. There is a chance you will see this error message. That is because even though the remote connection has been closed, but at the time, the server that is serving the Granite model is still running. So in this case, we need to run this line to check on the running processes related to Python. And as you can see here, we have two processes, and then one is related to the model we were serving earlier. That's the reason why we see this server error. This address is already being used. Then in this case, we need to run this command to kill this process that is relevant to serving the Granite model. And then this 15316 might be different in your scenario because that's the process ID that is currently running in my environment. So if I run this, I will terminate this process. And if I run this PS command again, you will see that the model serve process is no longer there. I can rerun the model serve command, and this time we will serve the Marinite model. And this time we won't see the error anymore, and we are now serving the new model instead of the Granite. So if I go to my second terminal, I'm still in this virtual environment. We just need to run ilab model chat. This time you'll see that we're now chatting with Marinite. That is because we're serving that model on the other side. Then you can start chat with this model, and you might see slightly different answers because we're now interacting with a different model. Now let's ask a question. How many abbreviations are in the following sentence, and what do they mean? And my sentence is, LOL, I know we're late, but my brother Kel and I will BRB. So here is the model's answer. Seems to me that there are only 2 abbreviations, but the model thinks there were 4. I would say the first and the last is correct, aligned with what my answer is. But in the middle 3, I don't agree with the model. That's why what we would do is try to teach the model to correctly identify abbreviations through the tuning process. To teach the model a new skills of recognizing abbreviations correctly, we need to start with introducing a few examples in the Instructlab's taxonomy tree. And taxonomy is a critical component of the Instructlab open source project. It is a way to allow new knowledge and skills to be added in a very organized way. So here we are already in the virtual environment in our VM, and our current working directory is Instructlab folder. And if we run the list command, and you will see that we have a folder called taxonomy, and inside the taxonomy we have three main categories. One is knowledge, which is information the model will learn during the tuning or training process. And the second one is called foundational skills. That is the model's capability to perform basic tasks such as math, coding, or reasoning skills. And then the third category is called compositional skills. Those are the skills that requires to combine knowledge and foundation skills to answer more complex questions. So in our case, we are teaching the model to recognize abbreviation. We would like to put it in the compositional skills. If we take a look at what's inside the compositional skills, you will see that we have one category called extraction, and we will put our training examples inside this category. We can keep going down the path, and you will soon realize that taxonomy consists of nested folders, each containing more specific categories and subcategories. This structure helps us organize and categorize information in a hierarchy manner, making it easier to locate and manage knowledge and skills the model needs to be trained on more efficiently. So if I dig deeper into that extraction folder, and then you will see that we have several subfolders in that category. Let's choose one of them and dive deeper. Let's go inside the email folder. And inside the email folders, we have more folders. So they're just folders nested in another folders. And then if you keep digging, you'll finally reach the end node. Here we are. So if I dig deep into the bullet points, you will find that we only have one YAML files in that folder. And if we take a look at that YAML file, you will see that basically it contains some training examples for the models to extract bullet points from an email. For example, we have a field called context, and that is an email we received. And then we have a question, which is to provide a bullet list of all the steps needed to complete the monitor purchase. And then the answer we're expecting to get the model is this bullet points. And we provided several such training examples so that the model could learn how to extract bullet points from emails. Now let's go back to the root folder, which is the Instructlab folder. We will start to create our example file to teach the model how to recognize abbreviations in social media chat. What I would do is to change our working directory to the extraction folder, which is inside the taxonomy folder and then compositional skills folder. And then we look at what's in there earlier. The next step is we will make a new directory called social media /chat/abbreviations. So this is something you could create based on your understanding of the skill or knowledge you want to teach and how you want this to be organized in the taxonomy. Then we will change the permission settings so that we can add our example file. Here is the Q&A file we created on our desktop. As you can see here, you need to provide the version, who created it, the test description. In our case, is to teach the model, extract, count, and explain abbreviations from chat. And then we will provide the seed examples, similar as the email example I showed you earlier. You need to provide the context, which is our chat we will provide to the model. And the question is, how many abbreviations are there in the sentence and what do they mean? And then the answer is the correct answers we expect the model to produce. But in the seed examples, they are carefully written and reviewed by human expert. So the reason why we provide these Q&A pairs is to help the model understand the right way to interpret abbreviations. And as you can see that we do not need to create many example pairs, because later on in the Instructlab process, we will use large language models to generate more training examples, which we will then use to fine-tune the model. So now I'm inside the abbreviation folder we just created earlier. And from here, I will create a YAML file called Q&A YAML. And from here, we will press I to enter the insert mode. And then we will copy and paste the YAML file we prepared. And now we will paste everything in here and press exit. And then we will type column WQ and press enter to save this Q&A YAML file. By the time you are putting together this YAML file, one thing that is really important is the YAML file needs to be formatted correctly. And one way to check your YAML format is using this website, and then you put everything in here and then click go. If it's a valid YAML file, you will see this message. Otherwise, you will see the error message, and then you need to correct the errors to make sure that the YAML file is formatted correctly. And Instructlab provided a very simple command for you to check if the YAML file is correct and ready for the next steps. So all you need to do is let's make sure we go back to the Instructlab. That's our starting point. And we will run the command, which is ilab taxonomy diff. So if we do the right thing, you shouldn't be able to see any errors. Otherwise, it will tell us there's something wrong with the YAML file we just created. And good news is that we see this green message telling us we're good to go for the next steps. Now we are in the Instructlab folder. We're in our virtual environment as root user, and our taxonomy is ready. Now let's ask Instructlab to generate synthetic training data based on the training examples we provided. We can kick off the generation job by running this ilab data generate command. And here we specify the number of training examples we want the model to generate. The default is set to 100, but here we just ask for 10 to save time. And then the Instructlab will start to generate synthetic data using the Marinite model, which is the default option. But you can also choose other models as long as you have downloaded it to your local machine. You have enough compute resource to host that model. And then you can observe the process of the model generating synthetic training data. Here you can see that the model is using the training examples we created in the compositional skills, extraction, social media, chat, abbreviation. That is the path where we put our Q&A YAML file. And then take a look at one of the examples generated by the model. So we have the question here, which is, can you list all the abbreviations that appear in the sentence? And then the input is, Jack is out of office, not work from home, right? And in the answer, the abbreviations are correctly identified and interpreted. But we also have examples that are not quite right. For example, this example, we have the question, how many people voted in the poll, but the input is missing. So it's actually not that relevant for what we want the model to achieve and generate, right? So this is very important to verify the examples generated by the model. That is one way you can check on the examples generated by the model. The other way you can check on the training examples is all the data generated will be in this generated folder. Every time you run the iLab data generate command, it will generate a bunch of data in this generated folder, and they're grouped by the time you actually kick off the generate job. And then all the data that's generated and will be used for the training process will be stored in this JSON-L file. So if we take a look, you will see that these are the 10 training example the model generated for us. So technically we need to review this file. If it's acceptable, then we leave it as it is. But if it's not that satisfying, we should remove those examples from the training process. Now we can train the model by running the iLab model train command. Here I made a mistake by running the legacy iLab train method, but it should work too. But technically you should be using the iLab model train instead of this command line. I also specify the number of epochs at 3. That means each of our training examples will pass through the training algorithm 3 times, and technically the optimal value of the epochs should be decided based on the evaluation results. But here we tried 3 just for demonstration purposes. You can also choose to specify the number of iterations, which means the number of times the model weights are updated during the training process. And in the context of LoRa, which is the technique used by Instructlab, what's got updated are the low rank matrices, which will be added to the specific layers of the original base model to achieve the goal of fine-tuning a model in a very compute efficient way. The number of iterations indicates how many times those LoRa matrices got updated during the training process. And during the training process, you will see this printout that indicates where we are in the process. And after the model has been trained, you will see the test result. So for each test, you will see the user input. In this case, that's the same example, the LOL and BRB we tested earlier. And it will show us what the assistant will say before the training and what the new assistant after the fine-tuning would say, given the same example. So you may notice that before and after we didn't really see a better result. Same thing with the second example here. the expected output is actually we just need the model to identify one abbreviations, but both before and after they're giving us the same result, even though the answers are slightly different. And the same thing with the last example here. Bad news is that the new result is even worse, right? Like the new fine-tuned model identify hey as an abbreviation, while the old model actually got things right. It might be a bummer, but that's actually what we should expect, because we have a very small number of training data, right? We only ask the model to generate 10 training examples, and we didn't really validate the quality of the training examples, and the precision we can reach in a CPU-only virtual machine is very limited as well. So the whole exercise is to show you what Instructlab is and how Instructlab as a tuning method works. And the essence is to use large language model to generate synthetic training data with minimal requirements for human curated examples. And you also learn how to run the whole process using the iLab command line tool. So technically, if we do everything right and run the same workflow on a high performance compute environment with GPUs, we should be looking at an improved model with much better results by the time we ask it to recognize abbreviations in the chat. The trained model will be saved in the models folder, so we can take a look at the models folder, and then you will see that this model start with GGML is the model we just trained. As we did before, we can serve this model by running iLab model serve and then specify the model path. And that's how we start the model server. And then same as before, we need to bring a new terminal, and we will get SSH to the virtual machine, sudo bash, and get into the Instructlab directory, and then activate the virtual environment. And from here, we can start a chat with the new GGML model with iLab model chat. You can see that now the model we're chatting with is this newly trained model. And let's test it out. That's the same example we used at the very beginning, and we should expect the model output won't be as good. As you can see that we actually got an even worse model. The model totally lost it and produce a bunch of gibberish. So as I mentioned earlier, this is totally something we should expect. The whole purpose of this lab is to show you the process, how Instructlab works, and most importantly, from the open source project perspective, this whole process at least let us validate the Q&A YAML file. The examples we created met all the requirements of Instructlab, and we should be ready to contribute that knowledge or skills back to the GitHub repository of Instructlab. Press Ctrl C, you can stop the model from producing more output, and we can enter /Q to exit the chat mode. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit this notification bell for more updates.